Tom Jones used to make women faint just by walking on stage. Tight shirts, jet black hair, a jaw that looked carved out of stone. That was the man the world knew for decades. But recent photos tell a different story. The black hair is gone. The face has changed in ways that go beyond aging. Surgeons warned him to stop years ago. One doctor told him his face could collapse if he kept going. At 85, Tom still performs. He still fills rooms. But the man on that stage looks nothing like the man who once owned Las Vegas. And the reason why goes far deeper than time. The hard beginning. Tom Jones entered the world on June 7, 1940, at 57 Kingsland Terrace in Treforest, near Pontypridd, South Wales. The world around him was hard from the very beginning. This was coal country. The air carried smoke. The streets were lined with cramped terrace houses. His father, Thomas Woodward Sr., worked long, dangerous days in the mines just to keep food on the table. In that place, boys were not expected to dream about stages, spotlights, or screaming crowds. They were expected to grow up, go underground, and work. Even as a child, Tom was drawn toward music. At family gatherings, weddings, and church events, people would call him forward and ask him to sing. He did it again and again. At school, other boys mocked him for it. Still, the voice kept coming out. At a family wedding, an older relative made a remark. People did not forget, this boy should not be singing for nothing. It was a small moment, but it carried a bigger truth. Then, childhood turned harsh. When Tom was 12, doctors told him he had tuberculosis. He was put on strict bed rest for nearly 2 years, from about 1952 to 1954. For a boy full of energy, it felt like a prison. He later called it the worst time of his life. Yet that same miserable silence pushed music deeper into him. He listened to the radio constantly. Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, jazz singers full of control and feeling. Without knowing it, he was training his ear, learning breath, tone, and emotion, while the world thought he was only a sick boy in bed. The dream that wouldn't die. When he finally got back on his feet, the old problems waited. He never felt right in school. He admitted later that he did not like school and did not like sports either. So by the time he was 15, around 1955, he walked away from formal education and took manual jobs, including factory work as a glove cutter in Pontypridd's leather trade. Employment records from the early 1960s listed him as a laborer and glove cutter, sometimes collecting unemployment benefits while chasing singing work on the side. Officials wrote mocking notes about him, calling him fussy and complaining that he did not want shift work because it clashed with his amateur singing. But what looked foolish to them was the one thing he refused to give up. His family life gave that dream its own strange texture. In Treforest, a man's worth was measured by labor, not glamour. That is exactly why his ambition felt almost rebellious. He was not just trying to become successful. He was trying to become something his surroundings could barely imagine. Then, adult life came at him fast. Tom married his childhood sweetheart, Melinda Rose Trenchard, known as Linda, on March 2, 1957, when they were both only 16. She was already pregnant. Their son Mark was born on April 11, 1957. Before he had even become a man in most people's eyes, he was already a husband and father, trying to build a life in Wales while singing in local pubs for spare change. The man who became a worldwide symbol of fame and desire started out as a teenage boy with a wife, a baby, and almost no room for fantasy. The reinvention. When Tom broke through in 1965 with "It's Not Unusual," manager Gordon Mills did not sell the truth. He built an image. He reshaped Tom into a 22-year-old single miner from the South Wales coal pits, a dramatic and marketable fiction. In reality, Tom was 24, had been married since 1957, had a 7-year-old son, and had never worked as a miner. But Mills understood what the market wanted. A married father did not sell fantasy the same way a rugged bachelor did. So the truth was hidden, and Tom was dressed and presented as a sexual force. Tight tuxedos, strong body, raw energy, irresistible to female audiences. What made this easier to sustain was Linda's own distance from public life. She suffered from severe agoraphobia, fearing public spaces and cameras. As his fame grew, she stayed back while he moved between London, New York, Las Vegas, hotels, studios, and stages. She did not attend his knighting at Buckingham Palace in 2006. On April 10, 2016, she died at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles at age 75. After a short but fierce fight with cancer, Tom and Mark beside her. By then, they had been married for 59 years. The scandals. Tom later admitted that during the height of his fame, especially from 1965 to 1985, he slept with enormous numbers of women, at times claiming the total reached 250 a year. He described a loose, don't-ask arrangement in his marriage. One scandal cut deeper than the others. In December 1973, 19-year-old Marjorie Wallace, newly crowned Miss World, met Tom backstage at the London Palladium. By early 1974, photos of them kissing on a beach in Barbados exploded across newspapers worldwide. Miss World organizers stripped Marjorie of her crown. Tom later admitted this affair was different. It really got to him. It also got to Linda. Tom recalled that she punched him in the jaw, shouting while he stood there and took it. Then came the paternity case. In October 1987, Tom had a brief affair with 24-year-old model Catherine Berkery in New York. They spent 3 nights together. Late in 1987, Catherine told him she was pregnant. Instead of stepping closer, Tom moved the other way. He hired lawyers. He denied knowing her. In 1989, Catherine took him to Manhattan Family Court. A DNA test showed a 99.7% probability that Tom was the father. Judge Judith Sheindlin, who would later become famous as Judge Judy, ruled and confirmed paternity. Tom settled out of court, paying a $50,000 lump sum plus $2,500 a month in child support. But he refused to see the baby. His son Jonathan grew up angry and hurt, spending years homeless, sleeping on park benches and in shelters. By 2025, Jonathan was 37, still singing on the streets and chasing a music career, but there was still no contact with his father. The comebacks. In 1988, Tom teamed up with Art of Noise for a bold new version of Prince's Kiss. The song exploded, reaching number 5 in the UK. At 48, a singer many had written off suddenly felt fresh for a new MTV generation. Then, in 1999, Tom released Reload, built around 15 duets. It sold more than 4 million copies worldwide, becoming the biggest-selling record of his career. Sex Bomb pushed it even further, reaching number 3 in the UK. At 59, Tom Jones was outperforming younger British stars. Then, television gave him another rebirth. In March 2012, at 71, Tom joined The Voice UK as a coach. He mentored 3 winners over 10 seasons. When he was suddenly dropped in 2016, ratings slipped, proving how much his presence mattered. And in October 2022, after 12 years away, Tom returned to Las Vegas at 82. Tickets sold fast. Reviews said the performance almost defied explanation. In 2025 at 84, he extended that Vegas connection again. Nearly 6 decades after first taking the Strip, he was still pulling people in. The surgery warning. One choice in particular became part of his image for years. His goatee was not just a style decision. He explained that he grew it to hide a scar left after fat had been removed from under his chin. Around 2006, he spoke openly about it, saying surgeons had taken loose tissue from beneath the jawline, and the mark bothered him. Over time, that dark goatee became one of his trademarks, and most people never knew it had started as a way to cover the trace of surgery. Even so, there came a point when doctors warned him to stop. In the mid-2000s, Tom visited a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon for more work around the eyes, but the surgeon refused. Tom later recalled being told that if any more skin was removed from the lower lids, his eyes would be popping out, and that his face could collapse if he kept going too far. By then, he was around 65, and had already had several lifts and small changes. That warning seemed to have hit him. He repeated it publicly and said the message was clear. He needed to back off and try to look as natural as possible. Reports in the 2010s said he had spent around £30,000 over the years on facial work and dental work, including eyelid procedures, chin fat removal, and capped teeth. Yet even in all of that, one idea kept coming back. He had been told by a surgeon that he still had to look like himself. He did not want to become unrecognizable to the fans who had followed him for decades. So by his mid-60s, he had slowed down and begun accepting more of the lines and wrinkles that came with age. The hair transformation. That change became impossible to miss in 2009. For decades, Tom Jones had kept his hair dyed a deep jet black, the same dramatic image people had linked to his fame for years. Then, in February of that year, at 68 years old, he stepped out in Los Angeles with the dye gone and a full head of white and gray hair showing instead. The transformation made headlines because it felt like he had finally stopped trying to outrun time and decided to stand beside it. Fans noticed right away. Tom himself said he was surprised by how positive the reaction was, and even mentioned that women still came up to him and said he looked distinguished rather than old. Grief and guilt. When Linda died in 2016, the grief hit him harder than anything in his life. At 76, he saw a grief counselor and wrestled with questions that would not leave him alone. Had he done enough? Had he been attentive enough? Had he failed her in ways he could never fix? The counselor told him the cancer could not have been beaten, but that answer did not erase the pain. He left their £6.5 million home in Los Angeles and moved into a flat in London, partly because staying in that house without her had become unbearable. On his 2008 album 24 Hours, he released The Road, a song that felt less like performance and more like confession. In the lyrics, he seems to speak directly to Linda, admitting pain, betrayal, and the damage he caused. He pleads for forgiveness and keeps coming back to the same emotional truth. No matter how far he wandered, the road always returned to her. The present day. Now, all of those years show on him in one way or another. Tom Jones no longer looks like the dark-haired 1960s heartthrob. By the 2020s, his face had softened and grown more lined. The old surgeries on his nose, chin, and eyes are part of the story, but so are age, grief, and time. The jawline is less sharp. The skin sits looser. The energy of youth has given way to the look of an older gentleman. He still keeps his gray hair neatly styled, and he still carries himself with dignity. But the roaring icon of the 1960s has naturally become something quieter and more weathered. Yet some things never lose their shine. In 2006, Queen Elizabeth II knighted him at Buckingham Palace for services to music. He was 65. Even years later, he said the knighthood meant more to him than any hit song because it felt so meaningful for a working-class boy from Treforest. That is why the name Sir Tom Jones carries such weight around every official appearance, tour, and television credit. Modern challenges. Even in old age, the modern world keeps forcing new challenges into his life. On January 9, 2026, he publicly warned fans on Instagram about fake accounts using his name and pictures to scam people. His team had found many profiles pretending to be him. The warning was blunt because the danger was real. Some vulnerable fans had already lost significant amounts of money. Tom urged people to block any private account that messaged them. It was a strange sign of the times. A man who had once been chased in person by screaming crowds now had to defend his fans from digital impersonators. And then there are the reminders that age reaches even the strongest performers. On July 22, 2025, he had to cancel a concert in Bremen, Germany, only hours before showtime because of an upper respiratory infection. The concert was moved to July 28, and all tickets remained valid, but the moment still carried weight. At 85, Tom had to admit that his body needs more care than it once did. Fans responded with support rather than disappointment. In a way, that moment said a lot about what he has become. He is no longer just a symbol of power and stamina. He is also a man people respect enough to protect. The legacy. Still, one of the proudest moments of his life came when the King of England recognized his enduring impact. In 2025, as part of the New Year honors, King Charles III appointed Tom Jones to the Order of the Companions of Honor, a rare distinction reserved for those who have made a major contribution to the arts. Only 65 people can hold the title at any given time. For a boy from the coal valleys of South Wales, that honor carried the weight of a lifetime. Tom said it left him humbled and grateful, proof that the voice that started in a small terrace house had never stopped reaching. The man today, Tom Jones, no longer looks like the dark-haired heartthrob. The roaring icon of the 1960s has become something quieter and more weathered. But he is still here, still singing, still performing, still standing on stages across the world at 85 years old. The face tells a story that the voice cannot hide, a story of ambition and betrayal, of grief and guilt, of comebacks and consequences. The women who once fainted at the sight of him now see a different man. But somehow, the voice that started in a small Welsh terrace house has never stopped reaching. And that, perhaps, is the only thing that ever really mattered.